Hello, and thanks for stopping by. Can you imagine modern day London without its underground system? It's almost impossible to, isn't it? The network is the oldest of its kind in the world, with a history that dates all the way back to 1863. That's when the very first line, operated by the Metropolitan Railway, began running trains between Paddington and Farringdon. And back then, of course, they were hauled by steam locomotives. As old as it is, though, the London Underground is a mere youngster when compared to many of the city's pubs, some of which are so old, so ingrained in the fabric of London itself, that their names have become synonymous with entire areas. It's no surprise then that a handful of tube stations are named after pubs, and today we're going to start exploring them. All of course run a bit of history about the stations themselves too. This is part 1 of 3, by the way. We'll be looking at 2 places per episode, so when we finish this pub crawl, please be sure to stay tuned for the second instalment. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, it'd be great if you could please consider doing so, because this, along with clicking the bell icon, will ensure that you receive a notification whenever I publish a new video. Plus, of course, it'd be great to have you along. Anyway, with that, hop on board and we'll head to the first tube station pub.
Please stand clear of the door.
Tucked between Hampstead and St John's Wood, the old Swiss Cottage is one of London's most unusual looking pubs. After all, you wouldn't expect to see an Alpine chalet out to an NW3, would you? The air here isn't exactly pine fresh or mountain clear though, as the pub is marooned in the middle of a major junction, around which a relentless stream of traffic flows. It wasn't always like this though. When the pub first opened in the early 19th century, the sprawl of London had yet to reach it, and had you popped by here in those far-off days, you would have been able to gaze out over open fields. Although having said that, one such nearby pasture was known, rather unglamorously, as Hog Trough Field, which doesn't sound too inviting to be honest, does it? Despite being out in the sticks, the Swiss Cottage tavern, as it was then known, was well served by omnibuses. The Avenue toll gate, which was part of a network of early road pricing, was also located close to the pub, and this meant a good many thirsty travellers were always passing through the area. For most of the 19th century, the Swiss Cottage was owned by the Redmond family, with one of the longest serving landlords being a popular fellow named Frank, who was in charge between the 1830s and the 1850s. Frank was a respected dog breeder, one of the best in the land it was said, with spaniels and bulldogs being his speciality. If you wanted an excuse to go for a beer at the Swiss Cottage Tavern therefore, I guess you really could say that you were going to see a man about a dog. In May 1843, the Illustrated London Life newspaper had this to say about Frank and his establishment. A merrier, kind-hearted man than the worthy host does not exist, and a better conducted domicile throughout the length and breadth of the suburbs of the metropolis cannot be found in a day's ramble. It is, in every sense of the word, a snug, complete crib, replete with comfort and convenience. How much drink do you reckon Frank had to ply the journalist with to receive that endorsement? Despite his genial nature, there's no doubt that Frank was still a hard-headed businessman. In the 1850s, for example, he raised a petition to oppose a new pub called the North Star from being built nearby on Finchley Road. The opposition failed, and just like the Swiss Cottage, the North Star is very much in business today. It's worth mentioning, in fact, given the theme of this video, that the North Star sits close above the tunnels of the Metropolitan line, and if you're drinking in there, you'll feel the rumble of trains beneath you as they pass to and from Finchley Road station. I doubt Frank was very much amused either in the summer of 1839 when a group of practical jokers decided to play a prank on the Swiss tavern. At the time, Queen Victoria, who was then only in her early 20s and very new to the throne, was a noted horse rider. The tricksters decided therefore that it'd be great fun to impersonate the Queen by making out that she had decided to take a ride up to the Swiss tavern. As one newspaper reported, this group was led by a woman who bore a passing resemblance to Victoria, and she completed the look by dressing up in the sort of riding gear that the monarch was known to prance around in. Then, with several outriders, she trotted through Regent's Park and on up towards the Swiss Tavern. As this merry band approached the pub, the accounts continued, Frank Redmond seemed keen to act as a worthy host, anxious to testify his respect and loyalty to Her Majesty, and insisted therefore that everyone in the pub, which was very busy that day, should step outside, doff their caps, and raise 3 cheers. The old-timer in charge of the Avenue tollgate, however, knew better. Through his work, he had, it was said, acquired a deeper knowledge of royalty than the crowd, and he was quick to call the pranksters out. The woman claiming to be Victoria might be a duchess, or a marchioness, or something of a less degree, he was reported as saying, but she was no more a queen than she was a Cerberus. What knowledge Frank lacked in matters of royalty, he certainly made up for when it came to sport, for he was a renowned pundit in all manner of pursuits, from horse and greyhound racing to cricket and boxing. He would have no doubt been pretty chuffed then, when, in November 1839, his pub was chosen as the headquarters for what was dubbed the Great Foot Race. This event had just 2 competitors, a pair of gentlemen named Townsend and Mountjoy, and the race in which they were to slug it out was a very bizarre one indeed. Taking part back and forth on a half-mile-long stretch of road adjacent to the Swiss Cottage tavern, the men first had to walk a distance covering 20 miles. Goodness knows how long that took, but I'm sure the spectators kept drinking. After that, they had to run for 1 mile, then walk backwards for another mile. If that wasn't enough, they then had to run a hoop for 1 mile before taking a wheelbarrow and pushing that for, you've guessed it, another mile. With that done, they were then required to load the barrow with stones, using only their mouth. Townsend was the victor, and he was rewarded with the handsome sum of £50, which is about £5 in today's money. I think I'd want more, to be honest, after undergoing that though. Once the arduous race was over, it was reported that both men were immediately taken to bed and rubbed, to prevent the effect of cramp. The road layout in which the old Swiss Cottage now sits dates back to the 1920s, and the neighbouring Odeon Cinema opened in 1938. The pub as it stands today is a relatively recent construction, dating from the 1960s. As for the tube station named after the Swiss Cottage pub, well, that's quite an interesting one, as the pub has essentially lent its name to 2 stations over the years. The first Swiss Cottage station was opened way back in 1868. It was located on the corner of Belsize Road, roughly where the present station's Swiss Terrace entrance can now be found. Built by the St John's Wood and the Metropolitan Railway, the first Swiss Cottage station was initially the terminal of a short single-track line which ran to Baker Street. The route had intermediate stations at St John's Wood, later to become Lord's, and Marlborough Road, both of which closed many years ago. The service building from Marlborough Road station is still clearly visible though. You'll find it on the corner of Finchley Road and Queen's Grove. In the 1870s and 80s, the line was extended from Swiss Cottage towards West Hampstead, Willesden Green and Harrow. The second incarnation of Swiss Cottage Station opened as a deep level tube station on the Bakerloo line in November 1939. Following this, the original Metropolitan station remained open in tandem with the newcomer for just under a year, before finally closing for good in August 1940. The surface buildings from the original Swiss Cottage station are long gone, although it's just about possible to spot remnants of its old platform area when travelling on the Metropolitan line between Finchley Road and Baker Street. The 1930s Bakerloo surface buildings have been swept away too, although this original ventilation shaft, which is located just south of the station on the corner of Adelaide Road and St John's Wood Park, still exists. Having opened just a few months into World War II, the ventilation system at Swiss Cottage was then fitted out with a special fan that could be switched to run in reverse in the event of a gas attack. Fortunately, of course, this was never required, and the old piece of kit is now stored at the London Transport Museum's Acton depot. Swiss Cottage Station was taken over by the Jubilee line in 1979, And to be honest, its current surface buildings, although handy for the pub, look pretty grim. Although maybe that's just me. Down below, however, it's another story, as many of the original features have been maintained. Just look at these lamps and tube roundels on the escalators, for example. They're beautiful, aren't they? And on the platforms, this smart brown tiling provides a reminder of the station's Bakerloo past. Perhaps best of all, though, are these little picture tiles, which are dotted here and there along the platform walls. They can be very easy to miss, especially if you're in a hurry, but taking a few moments to spot them can be good fun, and not unlike adding to a stamp collection. As well as illustrating several London buildings, such as the Houses of Parliament, St Paul's Cathedral and the London Transport HQ at Broadway and St James's, they also bear the coats of arms of the counties which surround the capital, such as Essex, Hertfordshire and Buckinghamshire. I must confess though, I'm not entirely sure what all of them, specifically the ones shown here, represent. If you know, it'd be great if you could please let me know in the comments. Okay, let's head to our next pub. There's something that really baffles me about this next boozer. Have a look. As you'll see, it's called the Porchester, which is fair enough. However, its original name was the Royal Oak, and that's where the nearby station, which is located just up the road and serves the Circle and Hammersmith and City lines, got its name. What I'm saying is, if you had a pub and a station on the world's oldest underground system was named in its honour, would you change its title? To be fair though, as with much of London, names have indeed changed and shifted in this area over the years. When it first opened in the early 19th century, the Royal Oak was located between Pickering Place, now the northern end of Queensway, and Pickering Terrace, now Porchester Road. The only Pickering you'll find around here today is Pickering Mews. Before I get all Pickeringed out, it's worth mentioning that a Pickering Place does still exist elsewhere in London. You'll find it over in St James's, and it's generally regarded to be London's smallest square. If you're interested in finding out more, I made a video about it recently, which I'll link in the description. Anyway, back to the Royal Oak. The pub now stands on the junction of Bishopsbridge Road and Porchester Road. The origin of Bishopsbridge Road is pretty literal. It refers to an early bridge that crossed the present-day Paddington Basin, thus providing a path to land owned by the Bishops of London. Porchester Road, meanwhile, which as we've seen now lends its name to the former Royal Oak, is a reference to Porchester Castle in Hampshire, which was once home to the Thistlethwaites, a family who also owned land in this part of London. The current Royal Oak / Porchester pub dates from the 1870s, and for quite a few years it had something of a fearsome reputation. It's also been through some interesting makeovers. In 1955, for example, the Royal Oak's owners decided to cash in on the new craze for cappuccinos by converting the ladies' bar, different times and all that, into a coffee bar, which they christened the Venetian, and it came complete with fancy columns, bold colours and a large mural of Venice. This was a canny move, as it allowed the business to continue outside licensing hours. It would appear that this also made the Royal Oak the very first pub in London to serve coffee. In 1973, the Royal Oak name was ditched for the first time when the pub was rebranded as the Railway Tap. In this new guise, the pub seating was made to look like carriage compartments, whilst the walls were decorated with an assortment of railway memorabilia, including station plaques and pictures of famous locomotives. It sounds like my kind of place. It's very difficult to find images of the Railway Tap. The best I've been able to do is this very brief scene from a 1975 episode of The Sweeney, entitled Jackpot. If you have any memories of the pub as it was then, please do let me know in the comments, as I'd love to hear them. We'll go and look at Royal Oak Station itself now. It's just a short walk from the Porchester. Unfortunately, it's a little difficult to appreciate the building's architecture today as it sits amongst the clutter of Lord Hill's Bridge and is also very close to the roar of the elevated Westway Road. Lord Hill is a reference to General Rowland Hill, a veteran of the Napoleonic Wars, who once resided in the Grand Westbourne House, which was located off of Harrow Road, just north of where the station stands today. Another famous local resident was the author Thomas Hardy, who lived on Westbourne Park Villas, just across from Royal Oak Station. His home is marked with a blue plaque. Hardy was living here in fact at the very same time the station first opened, on what was then the Hammersmith and City Railway, essentially part of the Metropolitan Railway, in October 1871. I wonder if he ever caught a train from here. The history of railways in this area can be traced a lot further back than 1871 though. The first line forged through here was Brunel's Great Western Railway, the early intercity link between London Paddington and Bristol Templemeads, which began operating in stages in the summer of 1838. The Great Western Railway actually shared Royal Oak with the Hammersmith and City Railway for many years, meaning their local train stopped here too until the 1930s. Because of this, the letters GWR were once displayed in that's now blank brick space beside the London Underground roundel. Whilst we're in the area, it's worth mentioning that another pub not too far from here referenced this part of West London's underground history. That was the Metropolitan, which was located beside the next stop on the line, Westbourne Park. The line through here was indeed classed as part of the Metropolitan line until 1990, when the Hammersmith and City line was given its own identity. At the time of filming, the Metropolitan, as you can probably see, was sadly closed down, a victim it would seem of the pandemic. Let's hope it gets up and running again soon. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Swiss Cottage and the Royal Oak. Sorry, the Porchester. Do you have any personal memories of these two pubs, or indeed the stations they're associated with? If so, please be sure to let me know in the comments. I always enjoy reading them and do my best to respond to as many as I can, as your kind support really does keep these videos coming. Remember, this is part 1 of 3. We'll be looking at another 2 tube station pubs in the next instalment. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, it'd be wonderful if you could please consider doing so, as this will ensure you don't miss out on any future content, as well as helping the channel to grow. And if you do sign up, don't forget to click the bell icon, as this will send you a notification whenever I publish a new video. You may also be interested to know that I've published 2 books, The Knowledge, Train Your Brain Like a Cabbie, and Waterloo, A History of London's Busiest Terminus, both of which are available online. I also have an Etsy store, Rob's Online Designs, where you'll find an array of hand-drawn London-themed mugs, including quite a few tube train designs. Links are in the description. For now, thanks again for watching friends. Stay well and please be sure to stay tuned.